I want you to remember this day, May 24th, 2025. This is a breaking point in the history of modern Russia. This is the time when country's current rulers, with Vladimir Putin on the top, start changing Russia socially. This is new. They have come out with this new agenda for Russian people and start implanting it into people's heads. This is long-term and fundamental. This is the final chapter in history of the country that we know as modern Russia. At this point, no one knows what will come next, but whatever it is, it'll be a different country. How do I know? I will give you evidence at the end of today's live stream. Howdy, friends. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. Welcome to Fridays. This is a Friday report I'm doing on Saturday. I'm picking one day out of the weekend, and this happened to be Saturday. So I give you crazy news update straight out of the mad circus that Russia has unfortunately become. But first things first. There is such no absurdity that could not be realized in Russia these days. Please remember that. And one thing before I jump to the news, Friday news presented on Saturday, I would like to ask you to forgive my sarcasm. It's very hard to navigate Russian news without sarcasm this day. Sarcasm is my way of coping with this crazy reality of mad circus, my way of not going crazy myself. And the news? Well, I call them crazy news from Russia. The news of Russia that matter and that you will not find in any mainstream media. Now, let's jump straight to the news. You know, I always start weekend news reports with good news, positive news. You know, the good news, they set the mood for the rest of the report. Well, here's another good news for you from Russia. You've heard from me before that Russian state has declared the crusade against books. Many Russian authors have turned out to be, good people, free thinkers, and activists. Many authors have stood up against the war and made themselves heard. The authors can do that. And Russian state doesn't like that. Many authors have been labeled as foreign agents and some even as extremists. According to Russian law, foreign agents cannot print books in Russia. Well, no one really can't print for them. They can't sign any contracts and they cannot do any business activities. And their books printed before they became foreign agents, well, they have been taken away from the libraries nationwide and trashed. And might as well consider them burned. This is not a good news, really. But hey, I promised you I start with the good news. This news is more like a social tragedy. This week, a good news came from Russia. From Russian propaganda, actually. Russian libraries have begun to buy Donald Trump's books en masse. Yes, American president. According to state-controlled propaganda newspaper Moskovsky Komsomolets, libraries in different regions of Russia have begun to show increased interest in the books of US President Donald Trump. The tenders, the bidding for Trump's books purchases began to appear on the public state procurement portal. For example, the Association of Magnitogorsk City Libraries in Chelyabinsk province decided to purchase the book Think Like a Champion: Revelations of the Tycoon About Life and Business. The book in Russia is sold at 883 rubles per copy, an equivalent of 11 US dollars. Also, the libraries in Chelyabinsk province intend to purchase the book The Portrait of the Controversial Leader. The Sayansk library in Irkutsk province is ready to purchase the book A Stranger Among His Own. And in Baikonur, Russian territory where the Russian spaceport is located, they ordered the famous book The Art of the Deal. Boy, that was my book, first book that I read in English back in 1996. The Art of the Deal. The libraries expect to purchase all these books that are published under the authorship of Donald Trump at the price ranging from 450 to 900 rubles per copy, from $5 to $10 to $11, something like that. Similar requests were received from Novy Urengoy, Namsky district of Yakutia, and the city of Bezhetsk in Tver province. An interesting news, isn't it? Oh, it's actually two good news in one. First, the Russians will have access to the sacred knowledge. They will read and will start thinking like champions, so they could become tycoons. And the second good news is, well, for Russia, is that Donald Trump has been widely celebrated in Russia when he won this 47th presidential election by many regular people and by Russian propaganda alike. He has been hailed as our man in the White House. Now, these rumors are sort of getting confirmed. Russian state spending taxpayers' money, because libraries in Russia are financed by taxpayers. So Russian state spending taxpayers' money to buy Trump's books en masse? I mean, why would they do that if the US president wasn't there, man? So, the second good news is that Russia seems indeed to have its man in the White House. Well, I'm not sure if it's a good news for anyone outside Russia, but hey, American voters made their choice, and I personally respect that. There's no question about that. The next piece of news is also positive, just like I promised. Remember, I said in the past that divorces in Russia have skyrocketed. They are high record right now. Well, Russian state is concerned and doing something about it. The good news, it's actually that divorces are bad, you know. So, the state, please step in, do something. And that's what they're doing. Russian Orthodox Church just proposed to return separation of genders in schools for prevention of divorces. No, I'm not making this news up. I'm sorry, they're reality in Russia, okay? At this point, I'm feeling bad already, you know? Yes, that is true. The authorities should turn to the experience of the Russian Empire of the 19th century and return separate education for boys and girls in order to combat divorces, said the head of the Patriarch Commission on Family Issues, the High Priest Fyodor Lukyanov. I quote, "The education system today doesn't produce a responsible man. A return to classical separate education will significantly reduce the number of divorces in Russia." End quote. According to Lukyanov, after transition to the 5th grade, there's a sharp difference in development between the boys and girls, so they need two different educational approaches. I quote again, and co-education in high school leads to the fact that after graduating, students cannot see each other. Boys and girls are separated, rehearsing their future divorce. Modern schools are also form deferred parenthood and the pronounced masculinity and femininity of separate education. On the contrary, would motivate young people to start family and produce offsprings immediately after graduation. I end quote. Now, did you follow what I say? I consider myself a well-educated man, quite intelligent, studied a lot, have gone over 10,000 of hours of analytical work in the last 3 years here on YouTube and reported to you. And I didn't understand that message. Now, I want to read that again, and please forgive me for being mundane. And co-education in high school heads to the fact that after graduating, students cannot see each other. Boys and girls are separated, rehearsing their divorce. Modern schools also form deferred parenthood. And the pronounced masculinity and femininity of separate education, on the contrary, would motivate young people to start a family and produce offsprings immediately after graduation. I kept on reading and reading, and finally I got it. Have you ever heard of John Grinder and Richard Bandler? They created NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. In a nutshell, it's a way to insert a subliminal message into a person's mind. And that's what it is. After reading and reading it, one phrase really catches attention. Young people to start a family and produce offsprings immediately after graduation. That's the message the church sends to Russian people, Russian teenagers, in such cunning way. I told you, Russian state cares of its people. It cares of children. It wants them to start a family and multiply, multiply, multiply. Now, what if they just not ready at 18? They finish school at 17, at some of them. But they're not ready at 17. I know the state pays underage girls so much money, 100,000 rubles, to have a child. But what if they just don't want to do that at early age? What if they want to go and get higher education, perhaps do a career? What's then? It doesn't matter. They have to be conditioned to get married after, start a family, and reproduce right after the high school. Just a way to combat divorces, of course. The next piece of news is also the good news. Now, this is a good one. Russian parliament called for the return of wired telephones and wired radios to every Russian home. The good senators explained themselves. This is necessary in case of disconnection of the mobile internet against the background of drone attacks. The good senator, Deputy Naumov, also called for giving a discount on paper newspapers to anyone who will miss the news from Telegram. And I think he was being sarcastic. Now, imagine, I take it that they're serious. Okay, I take it they're serious about introducing the wired phones into homes in wired radios. until today, until I was preparing this news, I hadn't heard a wired radio probably since 1991. Yes, we did have a wired radio. It's a ugly piece of a Soviet-made device with an outlet plug, and in the wall you have an outlet that's radio. That's not electric. And you just plug in your radio, and you get one channel. Anyway, imagine to change infrastructure of the entire country, to reintroduce wired phones and wired radios. Years and billions of rubles. Drone attacks, they say. Well, how long do they expect to have those drone attacks? Until the peace is concluded. But it's obvious that in their world, there is no peace. So they're ready to spend billions of rubles, and years. They have all the time in the world. I think Russian people have messed up their lives a little bit. Well, a lot. Instead of going forward, they're going backwards. A wired telephone? A wired radio? You know what? I remember that well. Our kitchen didn't have any electric gadgets, only a wired radio. And it was plugged in. Oh, pardon me, there was a fridge, an old Soviet fridge. You can consider it an electric gadget, right? So besides that, there was a wired radio. It was right there on top of the fridge. You had to plug it in, and there was just news and some good old-fashioned Soviet music from the 50s and the 60s. And sometimes there was a newspaper on the table, but never Pravda. My parents were smart enough to know that there was never truth in Pravda. For the ones who don't know, in Russian, Pravda means truth. It was a standard picture in the USSR, and when the USSR fell apart, we thought, thank God we don't have it any longer. Thank God we have FM radio. Thank God we have mobile phones. And now it is official. Russians are going back in time to the same wired radios and wired telephones. Imagine in the kitchen in Russia, somewhere near you, God forbid, no kitchen gadgets, only a fridge, a wired radio, and the books on the table. The Art of the Deal, Think Like a Champion, A Stranger About His Own, and instead of Pravda on the table, paper printouts from Truth Social. You know what? They're actually afraid of the future in Russia, so they're going back. Please forgive me. Wired radio. Just like we sang in the 80s. Huyak, we're listening to my yak. Those who speak Russian will understand me well. Wired radios. Ooh. Another positive piece of news. Russians will never run out of beer. Sales of North Korean beer called Tumangenga will begin in Russia in June. Yeah, this beer right here. Tumangenga. Tumangenga. First, it will appear in the Far East regions of Russia, and then throughout the country. Lager and dark stout. Yum! Send me some of that North Korean beer. Ganga banga. Russia has gone a very long way from drinking from drinking Soviet, and we called it piss, from drinking Soviet piss beer to German and Czech beer, the good stuff, to drinking North Korean beer. What a magnificent journey. Thank you so very much, Comrade Vladimir. I think it tells us everything about today's Putin's Russia. Important pieces of news. Pro-Kremlin politician scientist Sergei Markov proposed to populate abandoned Russian villages with foreign migrants on the principle of incubators, with the purpose to accelerate Russification. Check this out right here. We will take these villages and we'll put migrants in. 10 people of different nationalities. The men and women, 5 nationalities, of 5 nationalities and 5 nationalities, so they don't mix their own nationalities. They have to marry other nationalities. So they will speak each other in Russian. And to put Russian bosses there, so they would give them a migrant status. So they can be migrants in that village. And there they stay minimum 10-15 years without right to leave. 50-50, young boys and girls, they marry each other. Russian language, they'll have kids. And this is how advanced Russification will take place. And soon, all villages will be Russified and we'll have Russians living there. That's not good news anymore, Important, yes, but not good. We will probably find out soon whether the fighters against this universal Nazism, this Russian fighters against universal Nazism, would measure sizes of skulls of these people and control the breeding process of those migrants. Them good Nazi fighters. And the next piece of news also comes from the very same guy, from Markov. He said on the air of El Arabia, that's a TV channel. Listen to him yourself.
Yes, Vladimir Putin very much interesting in peace because Russia already paid a few 100,000 lives to this war.
So Russia has already paid few 100,000 people of this war. A few 100,000 people have been killed. This is the first time I hear this number of that magnitude from a Russian pro-Kremlin scientist or whatever expert. And interesting, you are so interested in peace, but you killed a few 100,000 your own people. How many Ukrainians have you killed? Okay. So combined, close to 1 million. How interested you have to be in peace to kill close to 1 million people? Nice. I was gonna say this is a Russian logic for you, but this isn't Russian logic. This is a barbarian logic. I don't know. I can't. I really have hard time commenting this news, Now I want you to take a look at this photo that I'm going to show you now closely. This is Alexeyevka, a small town in Samara region. Samara province it's in the central Russia, a little southeast of Moscow. A big village, really, not even in a town, a population of 10,877 people. Look at the monument to the fallen soldiers from Alexeyevka. They just opened in a local, victory park in the center of Alexeyevka. The monument to the fallen soldiers from Alexeyevka, the defenders of the motherland. Are you seeing anything odd, or should I say scary? 2 killed defending the motherland in Afghanistan. 2 people killed in 10 years. 1 killed in defending the motherland in Chechnya in 2 wars that lasted for 12 years. And the Ukrainian war, 34 killed in 3 years defending the motherland in Ukraine. Funny how they defend the motherland in other countries. And the amount of the killed, 0.03% of the population of Alexeyevka was killed in Ukraine. Take a closer look at what you're seeing. This is just one tiny town or a big village in big country called Russia. If we take the same proportion and apply it to Russia's population of 146 million people, we get 438,000 killed. So you know what? Markov is right, after all. I just have one question. Why? Why does this monument have to take place in Alexeyevka, in a regular, very usual Russian small town? Why? Why all those 34 men dead? How many Ukrainians did they kill? What for? And the next piece of news is, well, let's make it not so heavy-hearted. It's sort of a light-hearted. Have you heard of a shoe? A shoe. A shoe. This week, this is the first time I learned this name and this website. It turns out that a shoe is Russia's largest database and advertising site for prostitutes. Pardon me for saying things as they are, the prostitutes. In Russia, of course, they name it differently. They say Russia's largest escort services catalog site. Okay, fine. Words can be different. The meaning is the same. A shoe is Russia's largest escort services catalog site. And guess what? A shoe has chapters, departments in, sites for every Russian city, Russia's large cities. Guess what? A shoe has begun preparations for St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. This huge event coming up to Russia, it was created by Vladimir Putin, where he used to bring in all the big world leaders. Well, of course, they don't come any longer. No one comes any longer. A shoe, in return, on the contrast, a shoe comes to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Representatives of this escort service are already preparing to receive participants and guests of the forum and provide the best services they can. Unfortunately, I cannot post screenshots of a shoe that I made, okay? YouTube most likely would ban me very fast. Instead, I'm going to post the screenshots of Inside Russia Telegram channel. It is censorship free. I'm going to put the link to the Telegram channel after the description, in the pinned comment after I end this live stream, and it is in the description as I'm speaking right now. The escort workers, whatever you name them, they openly advertise their services targeting the honorable members of St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And when I looked at the pages of Ashu, I was very surprised because they really target their audience. I mean, those girls are good marketologists, or perhaps Ashu does all the work for them, but they target the guests of St. Petersburg Economic Forum. Check it out in the Telegram. You're going to be amazed. Now, I just have one question, all right? What exactly do the participants of the Economic Forum do there? Why exactly do the participants come and visit the forum? What a shame. Before moving to the next news, I have a message from the sponsor of Inside Russia. The sponsor's name is Konstantin, and Konstantin wants to reach you with a message of gratitude. This is me, Konstantin. I am the sponsor of this news update, live stream, and the entire channel called Inside Russia. I don't have any other sponsors except for myself. So I would like to take this time in the middle of this live stream to have a sip of this wonderful English breakfast tea. It is Twinings today. I rotate between Taylor's of Harrogate, English breakfast, Yorkshire Gold, and this. So excellent tea. And I would like to thank you. Thank you everyone for watching, for coming and visiting Inside Russia every single day. Thank you for your support, for your messages, for your likes, for your comments. Thank you for the feedback that you give me. Thank you for coffees that you buy me at buymecoffee.com. Thank you for Patreon and PayPal. I'm demonetized, so that's the only way I live and support myself and the family now, and I am very grateful for your support. Thank you for your messages with encouragement and praying with me, and for your love. Your support shows that you value my work highly, and just know that it inspires and gives me energy to move forward. I make you promise, demonetized, monetized, doesn't matter. Been demonetized for close to 9 months now. So despite of that, I will go and every single day in front of the camera, and I will be bringing you the truth about transformation that Russia is undergoing. Thank you. Now to the next piece of news, and it's about economy. The next few news are on the economy. Following the rapid rise in potato prices in Russia, a sharp rise in prices in other vegetables that are included in the borscht set or borscht basket, sometimes they call it, is also we are seeing that rise also. You see, in Russia, there's so-called borscht set or borscht basket is a popular measure of food inflation because very basic vegetables and basic food products are used to make borscht, okay? And change in prices for those products really show you the true inflation. As of May 12th, 2025, the average retail price of onions increased by 87.2% on year-to-year basis, reaching 72.3 rubles per 1 kilo. while and white cabbage became more expensive by 56.8% over the same period. The retail price reached 75.2 rubles per 1 kilo. If you ask me, those prices are absolutely insane. I remember onion being real cheap, around 10 rubles per kilo. Cabbage, 20 rubles per kilo, something like that. Now, um, 80, 72 rubles and, 75 rubles. This is just insane. This is reported by an official, respectable newspaper, Kommersant, and it references Росстат data. I also did look at Росстат data, and I fact checked it. One of the reasons of such sharp rise in prices for these vegetables is called a drop in yields, drop in last year's harvest. It is stated by the experts of the analytical agency AB Center. According to the experts, in 2024, the cabbage harvest decreased by 5.6%, and the onion harvest fell by 0.7%. Something is very odd here, okay? Inflation, the price increase by 87%, 72%, and the harvest yield fell by 5.6% and 0.7%. But okay, I'll give those folks the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps they know what they're talking about. Let's talk about the potatoes. Potatoes is what Russia lives on. Potatoes are used to survive, not to starve to death. I remember eating potatoes every single day in the USSR. It was widely available and fairly cheap. Anyone could afford potatoes in the USSR. Now we are seeing a completely different story in Russia. Potatoes in stores have almost tripled in price over the year. Prices have broken a historical record. Now a kilo of potatoes is sold at around 100 rubles. It is absolutely crazy. I used to get 5 kilos for 100 rubles, packs. And I think that potatoes were imported from Israel or from Egypt. I do the economic reviews of Russian economy quite so often. And I thought the skyrocketing prices of potatoes and other vegetables have normal economic explanation. For example, high interest rates, inability to buy seeds in the Netherlands and using inferior seeds domestically grown. Mobilization taking so many farmers to the front lines. High prices of fertilizers, high prices of foreign made agricultural machinery, things like that. This is what we economists use for explanations. But I was wrong. An answer came from the Russian government, of course. Whose fault is that? The high interest rate, the machinery prices, the fertilizers? No! It's people's fault. The Russians have fallen out of love with vegetable gardening. They don't grow potatoes any longer. Therefore, the record high prices. Therefore, it's people's fault, not the government's fault. The officials have nothing to do with that whatsoever. And Russians themselves are to blame for the potato prices. Well, I've seen a lot, but this actually shouldn't surprise me because that kind of goes along with what Russian government has been saying. But boy, this is... What do you think? Whose fault is that? Are you on the side of the economist Or are you on the side of Russian government? Let me know, please, in the comments down below. I'd love to hear. Whose side are you on? Mine or Russian state? The next piece of news is one of those news I really have hard time categorizing. I don't know how to explain what this news is about. It's economic news, all right? Russia's car manufacturer, AvtoVAZ, that's pretty much the only domestic car manufacturer left, asks the state to pay, to reimburse discounts AvtoVAZ gives to customers. The slump in car sales is forcing AvtoVAZ to become creative. And one way of support its sales, to increase its sales, right now they're not great. So they've dropped by about a quarter in 2025. So one way of support its sales is to get reimbursement of discounts that it gives on cars. That is what AvtoVAZ is asking from the Ministry of Industry and Trade right now. Sales of cars declined by a quarter this year so far. In particular, AvtoVAZ sold 105.7 thousand cars from January to April. That's 20.6% less than a year earlier. People, number one, don't want to buy AvtoVAZ, Ladas. And number two, they simply don't have any money saved up. And number three, they cannot take any bank loans because that's it. The interest rate is so high, it's impossible. But, I was thinking about that. What an elegant scheme designed by AvtoVAZ. Unbelievable. We design and build crap. We sell it for a lot of money, but at the same time, we give it a customer a deep discount, and the taxpayers will cover it. Nice. АвтоВАЗ, а рожа у вас не треснет. Well, another interesting thing is happening simultaneously. The Chinese automakers, they're fleeing Russia in numbers. Why? At first, I thought it's a part of the strategy, but then, no. They knew. I had an insight. They knew. They forecasted the shit show in Russian economy in 2025. High inflation, high interest rate, landsliding disposable incomes of people. They knew. They must have watched my reports when I was forecasting the economic tsunami. And they prepared. And they designed a great strategy. Now, check this out. Russia was using a lot of money from its savings account, the National Welfare Foundation, in 22, in 23, and in 24. For 3 years, it had enough money to last, to keep on going, It enjoyed extremely high oil prices, so oil exports surged in 2022, and Russia made lots of money. And that gave an economic boost. That gave enough money for the banks to give out loans like there was no tomorrow, okay? And this is where the Chinese automakers came in with their crap cars, and they started selling left and right. They were selling it in 22, in 23, and in 24. And guess what? Their cars are disposable. They last for 3 years. They started breaking down, and there's still warranty. And the Russians who bought the Chinese cars, they went back to the dealerships. But guess what? Dealerships no more. They have closed hundreds of them. And the Chinese sold for a lot of money crap cars and left Russia in and out. That's it. They used this opportunity to just get the cream from the top of the milk. It's actually a brilliant strategy, and Russians bought it. By the way, something is telling me that there will be plenty more news like that in Russia in the weeks, months, and years to come. If you want to keep up with other breaking news from Russia, consider becoming patron of Inside Russia, because every single day I carefully select and post 9 news that I find important with my commentaries and analysis. The news that will keep you informed of everything you wanted to know about Russia but didn't know where to look. On top of that, I am introducing a new kind of news, what I call daily insights or daily snippets, where I'm going to release 3 to 5 minute video every single day, available to patrons, discussing the most important event or news of Russia of the day, every day. Come to patron of Inside Russia. So consider becoming patron, get access to the news that matter. I'm going to put the links down below and in the description to this video, in the pinned comment. The next piece of news is actually, you could say that. That's amusing. Arrests continue. Alexander Nesterenko, the vice governor of Krasnodar province, basically second to the governor, second in charge, was arrested this past week. Krasnodar Governor Kondratiev said the following. The situation cannot continue like that. Half of the social facilities that we had to commence, we haven't even started constructing. Unfinished. Medical clinics, kindergartens, schools. There's social facilities. And I cannot ask people to understand more why we're not building it. Alexander, I've always treated you with respect, but I consider it's impossible to continue further joint work. Because I have such big responsibility. Yes, and the vice governor is right here. This man. So after this meeting, this guy, the vice governor, the second in command, was arrested. That's how you know when a governor blames own failures, perhaps thefts, on his deputy, and deputy gets locked up right after the meeting. Nice. And the next piece of news comes from Tambov. That's a province in the center of Russia. Ex-deputy governor of Tambov region, this guy right here, he is in the cage being charged. He is arrested and charged with accepting a bribe from Rusagra owner Vadim Mashkovich in the amount of slightly more than 2 million rubles or $25,000 for general patronage. Remember, I made a video telling that the first oligarch was arrested. Well, Mashkovich is the oligarch, okay? Now this case is being actively investigated and more arrests are made. First oligarch in line, his deputies, his um, junior partners, and now politicians around him. That's his team. This is an eradication of one power clan, a small one, a weak one, but still one power clan in Russia. And I think that is a showcase, a tour de force by the KGB, a message to other power clans saying, hey, you could be next. The next piece of news, this is, you decide what it is. I'll just give you the news. A year ago, an official in Krasnoyarsk province agitated school children to sign military contracts and go to the war, threatening another mobilization. This is the video right here. He's telling about, agitating the children to go to war, saying if you're normal people, if you're normal from normal families, then you would take a responsibility for our motherland. Americans are supplying weapons to Ukrainians again. They're supporting Ukraine again. And he's talking about peace, that in the future, sometimes it'll happen. That's why we send our boys to the war. I'm sure he'll come back, in one piece. Perhaps he will not go to the war. Perhaps first he will go to Crimea or other places. Anyway, that man came to school children and he was agitating them to sign the military contract. The head of Taseevsky district of Krasnoyarsk province, Konstantin Dizendorf. At the same time, he praised the 18-year-old boy who was standing there, who volunteered to go to the war, making him an example. That boy signed the contract, God knows, under pressure or perhaps, being uninformed or for some other reasons. Anyway, that 18-year-old guy went to the war. This happened about 1 year ago. And this happened recently, this past week. Konstantin Dizendorf turned out to be a criminal. He was charged with multiple crimes of corruption, taking bribes, and he was arrested. Being charged with different crimes, multiple crimes, sitting in the cage. So they locked him up. And this is what happened, what's left of the 18-year-old boy Dizendorf convinced to sign the military contract and to go to fight in Ukraine. That guy didn't even turn 19. He died at 18. If you're asked, I am asked often, in general, what is happening in Russia nowadays? This is what's happening. People lie. People steal money. People sell their souls. people convince others to go to fight and cash on them, and people die. And they kill other people in the process. This is what's happening. The next piece of news comes from the top level official of the government. Deputy Prime Minister Tatiana Golikova. Oh, she's been one of the top Russia's officials for a couple decades now. Okay, this woman right here. She announced that there is currently a 90,000 doctors and nurses shortage in Russian hospitals. Well, we kind of know that. My mom tried to get treated in Russia. She had lower back pains. She ended up coming here to Uzbekistan and getting treated here. She did that in under 2 weeks. And in Russia, she was trying to treat her lower back for over a year. Because there's simply not enough doctors. But Golikova finally revealed the reason for such shortage. Okay, we knew the shortage existed, but we didn't know the real reason. It's the beauty industry and private clinics, private medical clinics. She accused beauty salons siphoning medical doctors from state hospitals. And private medicine also contributes to this shortage. First of all, I doubt Golikova's words. 90,000 doctors shortage? I don't think so. More like 190,000 and growing. Perhaps even more. I don't know the statistics, but 90,000. Come on. And second, she didn't specify why this was happening. Okay? Why the medical doctors leaving state hospitals? You know what? I, as a Russian citizen, demand an answer from Golikova. Why doctors flee state hospitals? Because of meager pay, perhaps? Or dozens of thousands of doctors getting mobilized to the war, perhaps? Or dozens of thousands of doctors fleeing Russia because they simply don't want to live there? They don't want to take part of the crime that is happening? Perhaps of that? Well, you know what? I know what will follow soon. The state will forbid doctors to work at beauty salons or forbid beauty salons altogether. So doctors aren't even tempted. And people, come on, who needs beauty anyway? It's not the time for it, okay? Enemy is at the door. Forget about being beautiful. All right, before we move to the last news and the most important news, I think, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please, let me know what you think of today's news selection in the comments down below. Do you like them? Perhaps something you didn't like? Please let me know. Pick at least one. Much better if it's 3 news, and let me know which they are, which you like the most. This feedback would help me to get better selection next time I do live streaming, next Friday or Saturday or Sunday. Thank you so very much. Again, down below in the comments. The last piece of news today is an economic and social development milestone. Like I said, this is the day to remember. Let me start with the economy, and then I'll talk about the society. You know, I talk of Russian economy decline that I call the economic tsunami. Well, what is the economic tsunami? It has many faces, but there are major parts of it. And how about this one? Every 6th business in Russia, large or small, in all industries, in the country is heading to the bankruptcy fast. Where did I get this information? From the Central Bank of Russia. It has found out that every sixth company has problems with money with funds to finance its current operations. That is 17% of all companies in Russia. Net working capital is the company's money, company's funds that used during the production or trading cycle. And its structure of this capital is important for banks when considering loan application. It is becoming more difficult and more expensive for businesses to get loans, according to the central bank. Companies get loans less and less. Companies' total profits combined in 2024 decreased compared to 2023. And the share of unprofitable companies is growing fast. Translating into simple English, 17% of all companies in Russia are not having enough funds to ensure their operations. This is awfully close to getting to bankruptcy. And 17% is just the beginning. The situation is worsening every week. This what I have been talking about for 3 years, what I have been calling the economic tsunami. This is it. I don't even have to forecast any longer. I just have to look closely at what the Central Bank of Russia, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Industry, industrial development, industry and trade, that's what they say in report. That's all. Now, it's not just in the business world. The situation with regular people is even worse, actually. Russian credit card market is starting to boil over. 16% of credit card holders are already teetering on the brink of delinquency, and another 12% have defaulted their payments already. That's every third person is already one step away from a call from a bank with a threat to transfer debts to collectors. Why is it important? Banks were issuing credit cards like it was the last day of their lives for the past 2.5 years. And now they finally start paying for that. This is the payback. Remember, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 1 year ago, many were saying that Russian economy was growing, citing growth of consumption as one of the reasons. And even the Western media, the international agencies, even they took the bait. Well, credit cards and personal loans. People didn't make more, they didn't live better, they didn't earn more. They were just postponing their financial debts, charging credit cards. And this is it. We are seeing Russian economy in its current form dying. Convulsions are coming. Well, unfortunately, the current economy situation in Russia isn't the biggest problem. Recently, a judicial forum happened in St. Petersburg. I will talk in more details soon about this event as it is so important. It deserves more attention, significantly more attention. Russia's top legislators and siloviki, such as Prosecutor General, were present and spoke. Remember, I forecasted for quite some time that Vladimir Putin first would declare a victory in special military operation. That's what they call war in Russia. His second step would be placing Russia onto military tracks, changing the country from, being somewhat normal that it was in the past into being the second USSR, limiting the freedoms, put interests of the state on top of personal interests and so forth. I call it Putin. Putin would be putting Russia on the military tracks. We are seeing right now it is being done. Right now, Russia is being put on the military tracks. The process has begun. No one cares of the economy any longer. All these fundamental problems, huge problems, are happening, but no one is even concerned. No one pays attention. No one talks about it. The main idea that the judicial forum was the state interests are above personal interests. The state comes first, people, second at best. The state has started making the move. They announced that there will be changes in the constitution of Russia. They didn't say what changes. I think they're designing the changes right now, but there will be changes. They have announced that the things will change and more order will be introduced to Russia. And boy, I have heard that music and I know where it leads the country to. Well, the biggest problem in my eyes is the people. Instead of standing up, instead of opening their ears and hearing and analyzing what's going on, instead of asking questions, instead of demanding rights and freedoms that have been taken away from them, regular Russian people started doing this. That's Joseph Stalin. They have submitted. Not all, of course, but the majority. They have become silent and obedient. They kneel to Stalin and put crosses as if Stalin was God. Well, he is obviously God for them. It means just one thing. It means there is no hope. There is darkness ahead for Russia. There is blood. We've seen that happen before. We've seen when people idolized Stalin. What is happening right now is another big terror is coming, just like in Stalin's days. I can't imagine a better illustration of today's Russia than this right here. Moscow, center of Moscow, subway, public space. Kissing his feet and putting crosses as if he's God. Well, get ready. Turbulent times are coming to Russia. Carthago delenda est.